So, shall we start? So let's start with our meditation. As always, take a few moments to just focus on the breath going in and out, to bring your mind to the present, not to think of the past, not to think of the future. Let go of any worries, destructive thoughts. Visualize that in the space in front of you appears visualize in the space in front of you is Buddha Shakyamuni, who is an embodiment of all the teachings, of everything that you can attain, all the qualities of the Buddha. As well as inseparable from your Lama or your Lamas. At the same time, you're surrounded by every single sentient being. Who put all their hope in you. Those sentient beings we have a hard time with, right in front of you. And then let's remember every single sentient being has at some point been so close to us. Countless times there have been your mother, your father, your children, you just don't remember. So the same kind of love and warmth you have towards someone very close to you now, you have towards every single sentient being. So try to bring that feeling back, as if you could remember your closeness. And then focus on all the limitations, all the problems, mental and physical. Each one of them experiences now or will experience in the future. The worst being having no freedom, by being controlled by karma and afflictions. So generate great compassion in the form of wishing them to be free from every one of their limitations and wishing to help them overcome these limitations. This aspiration then becomes stronger. Turns into the altruistic attitude, which is a type of inner strength, an intense determination. Thinking, I will not waste this life or any future life. Instead, do whatever I can to help sentient beings overcome all their limitations in the form of endless suffering, afflictions, and so forth. Recognizing that right now there's so little we can effectively do for others, while we have this incredible potential to become just like the Buddha. Let's generate the mind of enlightenment. That aspires, or is even determined, to become fully enlightened. Remove all obstructions from our mind in order to be of the greatest benefit to every single sentient being. And then while focusing on the visualization and without letting go of bodhicitta, let's recite the prayer. Sangye chodam soge chonam la chanchu padu dagi kyapsu shi dagi jinso kibe chonam ki Drola penche sangye dropa shu Sangye chodam soge chonam la chanchu padu dagi kyapsu shi dagi jinso kibe chonam ki Drola penche sangye dropa shu Sangye chodam soge chonam la Chanchu padu dani kyapsu chi Dagi jinso kibe sonam ki Drola penche sangye dropa shu. Okay, so let's go back to the text. I'd like to say a little bit more about the last type of dependent arising. But before I forget to give you your homework, because I told you yesterday to continue focusing on the self, to search for it. Well, today your homework is to meditate on the 3 types of dependent arising. Okay? I need to say a little bit more about the 3rd type, since that's the most difficult kind. First of all, what you need to know is, when it says on page 19, in the second last paragraph from the bottom, it says that labeling needs 3 things. That's very important, because labeling doesn't mean I call something a car today and a football tomorrow. That's extremely important to understand that we don't randomly apply labels to things, which would mean anything is possible. That's not what is meant with this here. Very important is we need a valid basis of labeling. A valid basis. So there's a basis on which I then label I, car, table, and so forth. That's very important to remember. Secondly, I need a mind that labels. I need a consciousness that applies the label. Also very important. And I need some kind of label. I need either a word or an image, something that helps me to refer to that thing. So when I say car, what is the label? It's the word car. Of course, if we don't know language, for instance, if you've never learned to speak, if you're deaf, for example, well, you can still think about things. There's still labels that you use, which are probably visual representations of a table. So that representation is, I suppose, what does the table mean to you, basically? You have some kind of image that every time you think about a table, appears to your mind. Right? So that image, that visual representation would be the label. And when you were to write down, when you were to draw a table, that's what you would draw. That would be your label. Now, how does that actually work? To really understand that, we need to look a little closer at our own thoughts. Now that's slightly difficult because they're really fast. In 1 minute, how many things can you think about? How many thoughts do you have? Just from leaving your home until coming here. We talk about a train of thought, which is interesting because oftentimes one thought leads to the next. They're all connected. Not necessarily. Suddenly, I don't know, you see something on the street, you see it with your eye consciousness and you have the thought, oh, $100, right? So you bend down to pick it up. Whereas previously you were thinking about dinner. But usually there's kind of a continuation. Lots of thoughts. Oh, there's my bus. Oh, there's my neighbor, I better wave to her. It goes on and on and on. I'm really fit today. I can walk much faster than I can usually. Oh, I should rush a little bit. The bus is about to leave. Do I have enough change on me? Or maybe that's not what you need to take this nowadays. All right, whatever. Do I have my bus ticket or my cell phone with me? Anyway, so you have all these thoughts. Now, each one of them labels. Our thoughts label constantly labeling different things. So a tree, you see a tree, you label tree. If we didn't have that label, we wouldn't see a tree. We wouldn't see a tree. And honestly, when we say reality, is there a reality other than my reality and everyone else's reality? In the sense, what appears to me, that's my reality. What appears to you is your reality. Is there another reality out there that no one perceives? We don't even know, because no one perceives it. We assume there is. We assume there's this whole world out there that we just happen to see, that is waiting to reveal itself. But from a Buddhist point of view, actually that's not the case. Now, what we can definitely say is that things appear to our sense consciousnesses. That we would all agree. We can all agree on. But think when you were a little child, what do we know? I don't think we remember really when we were toddlers, the time before we knew language, but I guess we can infer that there was a time when just colors appeared to our mind, right? Just different colors appeared to our eye consciousness. And we didn't know this is a table, this is a chair. We had no idea. And our parents pointed out, table. Right? And initially we probably got it wrong. We thought it was a chair or, something else. But slowly we started to see objects around us. We were able to crystallize them out from within that, different shapes, different colors, basically colors that appear to us, right? And when you watch babies, I don't think they have a three-dimensional vision. When you throw something at them, they're pretty late when they grasp it. They don't really know yet how long it takes. They bump into things. Maybe because their motoric is not as developed yet. But I wouldn't be surprised if children had no three-dimensional vision. In fact, I remember seeing a documentary about about a man, who had been blind since birth. And his blindness was cured.
And when they removed his bandages, he said he couldn't see anything. He could see, I mean, in that there were all these colors, but he didn't know what they were. He didn't know there's a table right in front of him. He kept running into things. He talked about how he was in the car and he saw this sign above the road, and there was just something huge coming towards him. He was just scared. He didn't know what it was, because he hadn't learned to apply labels to these appearances. So to him it was not a road sign. To him it was not a table. In fact, he never really learned it. He still had to use his hands to move around the room, because he had labeled basically the world around him through his touch and not through what he saw with his eyes. I mean, labeling means he labeled, of course, also terminology, but also the appearances. Every time he thought about a table, it was not a visual object, it was something he touched. So I thought that was very interesting, showing us that the fact we can see certain things with our eye consciousness, recognize faces of people, recognize tables, chairs, being able to roughly see the distance when something comes towards us, we know what to expect. That is all because we labeled. We labeled and now we can see it. And of course there's the famous story of Christopher Columbus when he reached America, when he was drawing closer on this huge ship, that the people living, I mean the what we call now the American Indians, they couldn't see the ship because they had no concept of it. They probably maybe thought it was a dark cloud moving towards them, but they certainly had no, since they had no concept of it, they couldn't see it. And surely nowadays we see things that maybe we've never seen before, but we have some reference point. Oh, it looks like, I've seen so many things, it looks like a space rocket, or it looks like a living being, it looks like an insect or whatever. But if we were to see something we have never ever seen before, would we actually see it? That's the question. Anyway, having said all that, so therefore, here I'm talking about this initial stage of labeling, when we start to make sense of the world around us. Interestingly, depending on the culture you're from, you may have very different perception. Like I said before, the different shades of green, for instance, if you live in the center of the middle of the jungle, you have probably a lot of words for green. Well, we just say light green, dark green. That's about it. Secondly, certain foods that you recognize, certain expressions, facial expressions, you know that means yes. In India, it's like chicken, right? You kind of know it means yes, you recognize it. Whereas another person would go, no, they don't want to do it. Okay, so anyway, the point is that all this had to be learned by our parents. I mean, we don't remember, through our parents, through the environment, and so forth. Now, with regard to ourselves, when did, for the first time, we really understand we're totally separate? I think there was always a sense of I, because you can see like twins kind of pushing each other in the womb. Even then it's like, don't invade my space, right? But it's not a very pronounced sense of I, which is why children have no inhibition. Like a lot of people, it's not like, oh, how do they think of me? They don't care, they just go in there like, hey, who are you? Which is so adorable about children. There's not this strong sense of, how do I see myself in comparison to everyone else? How do I want to be seen? That is not there yet. Yes, I'm here, I like chocolate, you better give it to me, or else, or whatever, right? All that is there, but it's not, the sense of identity is not there yet. So all that has to develop through our thoughts. Through our thoughts, dependent on our environment, for instance. So, for instance, like if I say take this train of thought you had when you came from your room to here. Oh, so many things you were labeling all the time. We keep labeling, we keep reinforcing our sense of reality. Car, bush, street, neighbor. We keep doing this. We constantly, there's a narrator basically registering what is going on around us conceptually with our thoughts, and therefore reinforcing our sense of reality. If you move to a totally different country, there'll be some confusion. You need to first make sense of everything around you, right? If I were to live here, suddenly I would notice different buses. Now it's just bus, bus, bus. Which bus goes where? No idea, right? But slowly I start making sense of things and I start seeing things differently. My reality shifts because I label differently. Now let's look at ourselves, our sense of identity. Think of just yourself. When you were little, and it's hard to determine when it started, I believe this is so deeply ingrained in us that we were born with this, the sense of I. Of course, when there's a very subtle mind active, this thought can't arise. But as in the womb, the cells are dividing and our mind gets coarser, right? Coarser and coarser and coarser. There's at some point the moment thinking, I wouldn't be surprised. Not with words, but you don't need words. We have dreams when there are no words, when we don't dream with words. There are many examples of people who were in a coma, had very vivid experiences, but said they couldn't use language. They lost their use of language. So there's definitely a sense I, when they're in the womb and, I don't know, the mother eats something cold, like the thought, ooh, cold, or whatever, like, something they don't like. Anyway, the point is that we are born with this ability, but it has to develop. So at some point when we're born, I'm very sure that there's the sense, someone is coming toward me, right? My body. So every time someone touches the body, like, I like or I dislike, right? These thoughts, very simple thoughts, because there's not yet a very, very good sense of what's going on around us. But slowly, through our parents, it's not just I, but also I'm a child. I'm my parents' child. I'm a sister or a brother. So we start labeling, but always in relation to something other than that which we label. So in relation to our relationships, all the people part of our family, we start to label, I'm a cousin, I'm still a child, or I'm a toddler, I'm now in elementary school. So we keep reinforcing that all the time, and we get feedback from the world around us. We're not being ignored. You're a good student, you're a good boy, you're a good girl, right? And in our mind, I'm good, I'm bad. If, of course, our parents give us a lot of negative feedback, well, we may feel like I'm bad, I'm not a good person, I'm not good enough. If they give us too good of a feedback, we think we're more important than everyone else. We may become a little, selfish, self-absorbed. If it's kind of a balance, which is hard to strike, it also depends on the person. We may be self-confident, right? But not too arrogant, etc. Also dependent on our predispositions. Anyway, the point is we start forming an identity, but it's always the thoughts we have. And if someone tells us we're stupid and we decide not to believe it, we just go, they're wrong. I know better. right? Because in the end, what other people tell us, it's up to us to choose to believe it or not. Of course, as children, we're very receptive. We easily take on what other people tell us and hold on to that because we don't know better. But not every child is influenced by, I don't know, being told they're stupid and what have you. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is our identity is a mass of different thoughts. Many of them based on reality, surely. If I've always been tall, I have a thought I'm a tall person, if I'm really tall. If we're good at math, for instance, or good at other subjects, or I'm a good student. So the basis of invitation is there. Doing well in school, based on that, my conceptual mind gives the label good student. You have those three. Valid basis of invitation, my ability, my intellectual ability. Secondly, the mind, my thought labeling, plus the label. So our sense of I, it is not just I. It's more to it. Who we are in relation to other people, how intelligent we are, how quick we are, how slow we are, I mean, how good a friend we are. That's why I gave you this. It just didn't fit onto the page, really. Our sense of identity in relation to so many different factors, we label, right? So I chose a female form, could have been a male form as well, but it should just be totally neutral in and of itself, because unless we have certain thoughts, we cannot label. If we lack thoughts, we would have no sense of identity. So there are these thoughts in relation to our parents, I'm a daughter. In relation to a child, I'm a mother. In relation to a husband, I'm a wife. I'm a granddaughter. In relation to a degree, I'm well educated. Right? In relation to a brother, I'm a sister. In relation to our outer appearance, I'm pretty. In relation to my weight, I'm overweight, and so forth, right? So that's our sense in relation to our skills. I can repair cars. That's a very special. I can't repair cars, but but I'd like to add that. Anyway, so I'm affluent, whatever, just different things. I like jogging, what have you. So the point is, your sense of identity is the sum of the different thoughts you have of yourself. Many of them are realistic, definitely. We may also have low self-esteem. Then some of these thoughts are unrealistic. Oh, I always fail, or I'm not good at certain things, which is, you don't have a valid basis of invitation. But a lot of the thoughts we have a valid basis. There's a valid basis. So your reality of yourself, does it exist out there? Or is it the result of the sum of your thoughts? Of course, other people look at you in a slightly different way, but we don't need to go into that. It's similar, except that this is outside of themselves. They look at you, and then it's harder, of course, to get a right view. Your parents may get it right to a certain degree, but you also keep secrets from your parents, certainly, so they don't know everything about you, which is why they only have a rough picture of you, not as well as you do. You know yourself best. So you see how we can at least understand our sense of I is really just the sum of all the thoughts we have of ourselves. Think, is there any thought we have, it's always labeled independence on something that is not the I. I'm good at jogging. I'm a sister. I'm a brother. I'm a wife. So it's in relation to other people, but also in relation to, of course, this basis of invitation, mind and body. I'm good at math. I'm good at languages. I suck at cooking, or what have you. Right? Can you find any of these characteristics somewhere here, somewhere? No, you can't. No, it's impossible. So not only can the I that we constantly label on different parts, that is also very important. We label the I sometimes on the basis of my leg, on the basis of my nose, on the basis of my meditating mind, or my eye consciousness. Every time there is some activity by one of my aggregates, mental or physical, and every time I'm aware of that, I reinforce my sense of I. There's this thought, I'm running, I'm walking, right? We're aware of doing so. And because I use I at all time, there's a sense of permanence. There's a sense of something very concrete. Because I keep saying, I keep thinking, I. Or in Chinese, what's in Chinese? What is in Chinese? Watashi is in Japanese, right? What is it in Chinese? I.
War.
War. War. War. War. Right? Yeah? Okay. So, or here, one of it doesn't matter. So the point is we reinforce it, right? Again and again and again. We think it's there because it appears all the time. Of course it appears all the time. We think of it all the time. So we feel, oh, it's my experience. I think of it all the time. Yeah, because we label it all the time. There's the thought I. We think the I label I because it exists. But it's actually the other way around. It exists because I labeled it. Because I constantly have this thought. I'm so used to it. I'm so used to it. I keep having it all the time. I'm so accustomed to thinking of I versus everyone else. That's it. So this is where our sense of I comes from. And the next step, of course, is then to say, oh, but this is a little bit more precious, more important. Remember, I asked you for a homework, I asked you for a question. Ask a question. Why is it that when I perceive of myself as this concrete, solid thing, I'm attached to this? But if I perceive of you guys as something concrete and solid, I'm not attached to you. I don't see you as the center of the universe. But I do see this as the center of the universe. This may be a good time to answer this. Why is that? I perceive of myself, of course, in that obsessive way I just described, but even if I were to do it with you, you would not become my center of the universe. You could, okay, if our attachment is really strong towards a person, it's possible, like a child, for instance. But in general, how come that it's the misperception of the I here that leads to so much attachment and self-centeredness, or which leads this misconception leads to the self-centeredness, which is the attachment to I and my happiness, I should say. What do you think?
Because I love myself most.
Why do you love yourself most? If our mind perceives this I to exist inherently and her to exist inherently, why do I choose this to love this most?
Because I can feel myself, I can't feel you.
Okay, very good. Because my mind perceives the I, my body and my mind. That's one reason, definitely, right? I can perceive you, but I don't know what you think, and I don't know, my mind doesn't know what she thinks and doesn't know what she feels. Very good. What else? What could be another reason?
Habit.
Pardon?
Habitual. You're habituated
to habituate it. Yes, but how come I'm habituated to it? What's the reason? You're right, absolutely, that's true. But what were the reasons what are the reasons that I am habituated to this? First of all, as Piri is right, Piri said, because I've experienced this mind and I experienced this body. Very true. Any other reasons?
Because I'm more important.
But why are you?
Because I can feel I love myself. I'm more important than the others.
Okay, all right. This is true, but the first reason, yes, you can feel your own body, you feel mind. But let me tell you this one. It is that the mind perceives this I to be closest to it. The mind that labels I, that labels this person, and the mind that labels this person, there's a distance from the point of view of this mind. From the point of view of this consciousness, the I that it labels, that's closest to it. Right? In terms of proximity, if you like. So where does it perceive the I? Closest to the mind. Because what labels is really the mind. It's just the mind that labels. It's the mind that experiences the body, it's the mind that experiences other minds. And it experiences its own self as closest to itself. And perceiving its own self closest to itself, therefore it believes the happiness that the mind wishes to gain can only come from this I. Every mind wants to intuitively experience pleasant feelings. This is not an affliction. There's nothing wrong with that. A mind naturally wants to have pleasant experiences and not unpleasant experiences. Right? A mind just wants to be calm. A mind wants to be calm, a mind wants to be happy. Now this mind that misperceives the self has that same wish for happiness, and it believes the self that is closest to me, that can bring me that happiness. No one else can. In fact, they may threaten my happiness. So I perceive there to be inherent I, an intrinsic I. On top of that being labeled, I believe there's more than that. And since the mind wants happiness, the mind that misperceives the I, just as every other mind does as well, well then it exaggerates the need for the happiness. A sense that my happiness is inherently here, yours is inherently there, you're inherently separate from me. Because if my mind perceives inherent existence, well, my ignorance perceives everything to exist inherently. You are inherently separate from me. You are inherently over there. So I create this divide. And now I can work towards my own happiness, sacrificing yours willingly as long as I get mine. Do you see what I'm saying? So therefore we label first. Okay, there's nothing wrong with labeling. Having this thought, this, I'm that, creating your own identity. But because we have this habit of our misconception of reality, as he was saying, as Caleb, your name is Caleb? Kelvin, sorry. As Kelvin was, I could just give you the name of a vegetable, sorry. Kelvin, it's a very healthy vegetable though. No, as Kelvin said, right? Yeah, we're habituated to it, absolutely. So, our misperception of reality, we've had it since the beginning of this time, and they keep setting in and adding to our merely labeled I, perceiving so much more there. I'm inherently this, I'm inherently that, I'm an inherent mother, I'm an inherent father, I'm an inherent brother, I'm all this inherently, and you are inherently different from me. And my happiness is inherently more important. So you have this exaggeration. Everything is blown up. As soon as it becomes inherently that, I see this very solid, as very clear-cut from everything else. So I exaggerate myself, my importance, my happiness. Does all that make sense? It's a very complicated psychological process. It needs steps in between. How we create a realistic identity, and how then on the basis of that realistic identity, we keep exaggerating. We're not always exaggerating. The thing is, the self, our identity always appears as inherently existent. It always appears that way. But we don't always actively hold on to the I existing inherently. There are only certain moments in time when that happens. But even when our misconception of reality lies dormant, when it's not active, or when our self-centeredness is not active, Our self-centeredness is what? A type of attachment. It attaches to its object. It holds on to myself and my happiness. And even when it lies dormant, that holding on to expresses itself in all our actions. Even when the self-centeredness is not active, it expresses themselves in what I say, in what I do, in the back of my mind, for a lack of a better word, or deep within, from a subconscious level, even when the mind is dormant, that self-centeredness, it informs all my actions. It influences all my actions. To really perform a totally altruistic action, that's pretty rare. I may perform one thinking, people probably think I'm so altruistic. So it may look like an altruistic action, right, at the outside. But I may have a short moment, I really want to be altruistic. I have that short moment, but then, oh, how do people look at me when I do that? Oh, they like me better. And right away it comes back. We have these short moments when the self-centeredness is just totally inactive, but it's a very short moment. Remember, I mentioned many times, there are people who spontaneously run into a burning building, seeing a child screaming for help, for instance. But if they were to sit down and really reflect, do they want to run inside or not? Right? Don't think too long. I mean, they may still do it, and just give up everything. It's possible, because it's such a special situation. That shows, I believe, that we do have the potential to be totally altruistic, etc. But self-centeredness is our obstacle right now, our main obstacle. Does that make sense? Everything I said, how we label. Now with the I, it may be a little bit easier because it's right here, it's something internal. It's harder, I guess, to a certain degree with other things. His argument yesterday about the car. We have a sense there's this reality out there that just does its thing, and so we just happen to walk in there and see it. But we shouldn't forget that that which happens around us is a result of our karma, collective karma possibly. So going back to the bowl of liquid, that is very powerful analysis, or a very powerful, not analysis, analogy or example is better, so a very powerful example of the karma that we collectively accumulated. In the sense, collectively means we've all accumulated the karma to be reborn as human beings. So we have typical human experiences. We see the world in a particular way. Colors appear to us in a particular way, but the colors we can perceive are only in a certain spectrum. And of course, as we talked about yesterday, they're really just light waves, but due to our retina, we perceive them in a similar way. We don't know exactly whether it's the same. Another example I forgot to mention about the fact that we may perceive colors very differently, although we may call them the same, is the BBC dress. Anyone heard about the BBC dress? You haven't heard? Okay, it was a long time ago. Yeah, if you Google BBC dress, you pretty much get it. There was the story on the BBC that became quite famous, of a girl talking to her mom about what the mom was supposed to wear during her wedding. And so the mom sent a photograph to her daughter, and the daughter said, "Oh, it's blue-black." And the mom said, "No, it's gold and white." And there was like this whole argument. What is it? Is it gold and white, or is it blue-black? And because of the shadow and the whole setting of the photograph, it turned out that half of the population, they tested that with a lot of people, that probably half of the population sees it as black, and you heard about it, black and blue, and the rest as golden and white. And I remember we had lunch once with Geshe Kelsang, and it came up in that context. Geshe had just finished his teachings on Madhyamaka, so it's about 8 years ago. And we brought it up, and all of us looked at the picture. You can find it. You can just Google BBC dress, it's right there. And half of us said it was blue, black, and the rest of us said it was gold and white. Half. I mean, it was really like, well, maybe it wasn't exactly half, but it was pretty close to half. So you see, even with us human beings, we do sometimes perceive things in a different way. Our eye consciousness, our brain, all of this is different. So what I'm trying to say is, we label this world, but it's not just that. The world appears to us in a unique way as human beings. The world wouldn't appear to us if we were a sea cucumber. In the same way, right? I mean, I'm choosing a random living being here, right? It's not like lots of sea cucumbers roaming the streets of Singapore. But the point being, you know, still there's a very different perception of reality. And so whose reality is real? It's all subjective. It's subjective. And why do we believe in an objective reality? I think it's very much influenced by science. Because when science first came into existence, 300-400, modern science was first developed, there was this wish to see the world like a bird, to have like a God view, see things for what they are, right? Have an objective, forgetting that every time you perceive something, it's only your subjective mind. What is the measurement? What calculates the measurements, interprets the measurements? It's a subjective mind. Now nowadays science no longer has that sense, but I think it's ingrained in us that somehow science gets an objective view of reality. That there is such an objective view of reality, because science has set out 300-400 years ago to discover it. But there isn't. And again, as I said, nowadays more and more scientists understand it's totally subjective, right? So we have these subjective appearances, everything. So what is reality? The sum of everyone's appearances based on their karma. And on top of that, on an even deeper level, these appearances are labeled in different ways. Good, bad, good political leader, not good political leader, okay, chair, tree, there we mainly agree. Also, although some people may call it a bush instead of a tree. Fruit or vegetable, some disagreement there. Inherently, it's neither a fruit nor a vegetable, so that's why we can disagree. The example, when does the sprout come into existence? Remember I said, if I take a photograph of a seed growing into a sprout, and I take 5 million pictures, and I put them up on the washing line from here to ABC, with numbers on each picture, and I ask you to choose the first moment of the sprout, you won't all agree, because it's a matter of labeling, a matter of opinion. It's not as clear cut, because the sprout is not in and of itself a sprout. It's a phenomenon that has slowly changed, and as humans we've decided to call this a seed and this a sprout. From its own side, it's neither. Does that make sense? That's what it means to label. The sum of our thoughts is the sum of what we've labeled. And we continue to label. There's slight changes how we perceive reality, because we slightly change. The things that appear around us, they change. So there's a change. We think of ourselves as differently. We get to do more things, we're better at certain things. We may not be able to do other things because we age, or our body just changes. So we see ourselves in a slightly different way. Okay? That's it. But the problem is, although we label pain and so forth, we perceive, of course, and pain is very powerful. Pain is very powerful. Pain is real, but not inherently real. Our mind labels it up on a subconscious level as pain. Like I said, when you realize emptiness directly, there is no longer pain or pleasure. It's just a sensation. But now we label it because it benefits us. We label it as beneficial, as pleasant. It harms us. We label it as negative. If we didn't care whether it harms or benefited us, if we lost that because we realize we don't exist inherently, it becomes a sensation. A prodding, a pulling, a stinging, and that's it. It all makes sense. Why a bodhisattva, once they realize emptiness directly, pain has a very different effect on them. Alright, okay, I wanted to say this much. Sorry, it was a bit long. Very long introduction. But I believe labeling is the greatest stumbling block we have when it comes to understanding the third type of, well, dependent arising, and therefore the third type. Okay, so, going back to everything I said, or based on everything I said, let's go to page 20. We've covered pretty much the snake, how both are labeled, whether snake or rope. One is correctly labeled, the other one incorrectly, but in both cases, beyond the label snake, you don't find anything inherent. Then Chandrakirti says in his commentary on Ayadeva's 400 verses, that's on page 20, undoubtedly, phenomena that only exist because of the existence of conceptual consciousness and would not exist without a conceptual consciousness do not exist in and of themselves, like a snake that is designated on the basis of a coiled rope. So they're just based on a certain basis of imputation, on a conceptual consciousness, a label, but beyond that, there's no object from its own side presenting itself as snake. Furthermore, conceptual consciousness not only labels things in dependence on their basis of designation, it also designates them in relation to and in dependence on other phenomena. Okay. For instance, a man is labeled son in dependence on his parents, grandson in dependence on his grandparents, brother in dependence on his sibling, father in dependence on his child, and so forth. So you've got the drawing here. That's really just a shorter version of the picture I showed you with the woman. Apart from being labeled a son, grandson, brother and father in relation to his parents, grandparents, so he has all these thoughts of himself as son, as father, etc. So apart from these, in relation to parents, grandparents, sister and daughter respectively, the man is not from his own nature or inherently a son, etc. And no sonness, grandsonness, some kind of essence that makes him a son, can be found among his mind and body. But how do you think of yourself? A little bit more fatherness, right? It's important, right? It feels it's a little bit more than that. But we never explore it. And we are, of course, fathers and mothers and what have you. We are all that. And it's not always a problem thinking of yourself as inherently a father. It's not always a problem. But in certain situations, it can become a huge problem. Like your own children. I'm a father of these children. They're important. They need to be saved. The rest is less important. Right? That's a problem then. If we can ignore the welfare of other people because they're not mine. And if there's a whole nation involved, us versus them, well, that's how war starts. That's how war starts, right? Inherently them, inherently us. Inherently us being important, inherently them, worth to be destroyed. Similarly, a pencil is labeled long in relation to something shorter, such as a matchstick, and short in relation to something longer, such as a ladle. Short and long do not exist in and of themselves, and are not found from the side of the pencil, because without something longer or shorter, and without conceptual labeling, these properties would not exist. Long. Unless there is someone labeling it, there's a conceptual mind having at least the thought of long, there wouldn't be any longness, right? Where's the longness found? In the beginning, in the middle, in the end, right? short and long do not exist in and of themselves, are not found from the side of the pencil. So just as the pencil is not inherently a pencil, none of its properties exist objectively, and thus independently of being merely designated by thought. So think of all the objects. What we have a hard time with is that we still believe there's this objective world. But think again. Think of the vessel. Never forget the vessel. The moment you have a problem with subjective reality, think how just a vessel that is filled with water appears as nectar to a celestial being, as passing blood to a preta, possibly empty to another preta, and as water to a human being, as a living space to a fish. Oh, nice living space. Nice apartment. Oh, no, I shouldn't call it that. But, a bowl with water. So, who's right and who's wrong? It just depends. It's in relation to them. So, what we perceive on the basis of that, we label water. Water cannot be found from the side of the object. And it's only an appearance to our mind based on which we label. Where we see water right now, another being sees something totally different. Are they wrong? No, they're not wrong. It's based on their karma that they perceive that. Based on my karma, I perceive something else. Right? Okay. Anyway, so you've got the little drawing with the matchstick, the pencil, and so forth. In short, all phenomena arise and exist in dependence on countless other phenomena. Countless, that's important. Therefore, they do not exist objectively and from their own side. This is true for persons, bodies, minds, and even emptiness itself. Even emptiness itself is merely labeled. For qualities such as long, short, big, small, good and bad, for continuities in time such as weeks, months, and years, and for activities such as talking, thinking, coming and going, with regard to... Oh, there's something wrong. Oh, there should be a full stop. Yeah, that's a comma here, should be a full stop. So this is true for all these different categories. Usually we give the example, table, I, you, flower, done. But we need to think of activities. Like an activity. What is an activity? Walking. You've got here the drawing, or like an illustration of someone walking. Where's the walking? Which moment is the walking? None of those are walking. Yeah? It's a bit like when you look at in the old days when you still had film rolls, when they were developed, and you had like just little frames, and none of these were the movements. They had to be moved in such a way that you could see a continuation. So similarly, every movement is really like little pictures, and none of those are the walking. So on the basis of a certain amount of movements in time, then we label walking. There's no walking found in any of these steps. It's merely labeled. Thoughts, you need to have a continuum to think something. Cooking, you need a continuum. Also here, going or coming. What is it? Which one is it? This one is, depending on where you are, this is coming, this is going. But if you stand in the back of this, it's the other way around. Is it inherently going or coming? No, it can't be. It depends. Okay? So this is always the case. It depends. Am I inherently I? It depends. From your perspective, I'm not I. Right? Okay. The word merely, so from your perspective, I'm you, right? Okay, so the word merely implies that phenomena are designated without existing truly or inherently, and thus without existing in addition to, from the side of, or inherently within their basis of designation. They exist conventionally, since they are labeled in dependence on common conventions. The moment we start to search, for instance, for an I that can be located precisely in space and time, or that exists separately from its parts and designation, we engage in ultimate analysis and thereby in the search for an inherently and ultimately existent I. Since such an I cannot exist, it cannot be found by ultimate analysis. Even the merely imputed I cannot be found by ultimate analysis. For even if it were findable by that type of analysis, it would have to exist inherently. Because the conventional I, if we engage in ultimate analysis, we automatically look for something inherently. We look automatically for something that exists beyond being merely labeled. And if we were to find something, it would have to exist inherently. Yet although there is no inherent I, it does exist. The I exists because it exists conventionally, which is sufficient for it to exist. In fact, it cannot exist any other way. It would be absurd if it existed the way it appears to us. That's hard to, because we can make it work. Yes. Inherently exists, still exists for us, it makes perfect sense. But if we really analyze and we do this continuously, remember I said to you before, the reason we have such a hard time with it is just that we don't really think about it enough. 24 hours a day, we reinforce our misperception of reality. If you were now, someone held a gun to your head, you were put into Singapore Buddhist prison and you had to now meditate on emptiness the whole time, I think you leave prison a very different person. If they could thought control you, you went to some kind of extreme place, so they had like a device to see what your thoughts were, if you like, you depend on it. We would all do it, because our life is precious. We would all, and it would be very different. But right now, I don't know whether we're even hobby Buddhists. Right? It's kind of a sparsely practiced hobby. I mean, we do practice, I'm exaggerating, but we probably have time sometimes it's just off our mind and then it's just far away. So, therefore, if we did this more and we thought about this all the time, I believe His Holiness the Dalai Lama has recently so often talked about every morning I do this. He says it again and again and again and again. And it's like, I've heard it so many times, but at some point it sticks. Right? It sticks. You're like, what is most important? Oh, emptiness and bodhicitta. So hopefully we start doing it. So people say it's so difficult. I think no, we say it's so difficult. People say it's so difficult. No, we say it's so difficult. No, everyone says I say it's so difficult just because I don't do it. It's kind of like saying, oh, yoga is so difficult, but never doing it. Oh, yoga, I can't do yoga because I don't practice yoga. So of course it's difficult. Yeah. So it's a bit like that. I mean, it is difficult. But if you're going to do it again and again, but we're not good with boredom. Because you pretty much have to do the same meditation time and again. And wow, we live in the age of high-speed internet and a new Netflix movie every week and what have you, right? We need new fashion every day, new this and that every day. So for us, repetition has become really hard. Repetition has become difficult. Yeah. So we have to get used to repetition. But we can juice it up. We can spice it up, right? We can spice it up. You can kind of visualize it slightly differently every time. Yourself on a beach. Find yourself you're on this beautiful beach, enjoying yourself. Great drink. Where's the I enjoying the beach? Or yourself in a cram. I don't know. Bus. No space. Everyone kind of poking you and pulling at you and where's the I? Every time it's a different I, right? Making it more exciting, juicing it up, spicing it up. Okay. So in order to develop a comprehensive understanding of emptiness and dependent rising, it is important to understand the true truth. Finally, we get to the truth. That was just the introduction. As mentioned before, all phenomena can be categorized into the true truth. I said that in the very beginning of this handout. Conventional truth and ultimate truth. Therefore, the true truth are not ideas or opinions, but the phenomena themselves. This is also like, we don't talk like that. Ooh, that is a conventional truth. It's weird, isn't it? I remember in Dharamsala, I used to teach a class, and different people attended it, and there was this elderly guy from Texas. He looked like a Texan farmer, like a ranch hand. I think he even wore these kind of jeans overall kind of things. So he was a really sweet guy. And then one day, he was always desperate with all the jargon. And one day I asked him to say something, to answer something, and he didn't know the words. And he was like really desperate. He said, we don't talk like that in Texas. I can't do the accent of that Texan accent. I mean, not only do we not talk like that in Texas, I mean, who talks like this? Oh, did you wash up the conventional truth? Yeah, these are. Is this an unusual way of speaking? I mean, calling a truth is usually an idea or an opinion. It's not the thing itself. So we need to just get used to thinking that everything that exists is either a conventional truth or an ultimate truth. Ultimate truth refers to emptiness. That is to say, the lack of inherent existence of a phenomenon. That non-findability when you engage in ultimate analysis. Not being able to find anything. That is emptiness. When you engage in ultimate analysis. It is explained in order to present how phenomena actually exist. Everything else that exists, other than emptiness, is a conventional truth, which is taught to describe the way in which we ordinarily perceive phenomena. Chandakirti says in his clear words, the teachings of the Buddhas, such as the series of sutras and the like, are based on the true truth. So everything is based on those truths. The true truths are known by different consciousness. So the different types of consciousness that perceive the conventional truth and the ultimate truth. That's important. That's why they're not contradictory. For instance, are sounds and sights contradictory? They're very different, right? The sound is very different from the sight. But there is no contradiction, they're just perceived by different minds. So the eye consciousness doesn't perceive sound, and the ear consciousness doesn't perceive color. There's no contradiction because although they're quite different, there's no contradiction that they both exist. So similarly here, the true truth are just known by different types of consciousness, both equally valid. They're understood independent on the two types of valid cognizers that mainly perceive them. So a valid cognizer, this is a technical term that is used to describe a mind that incontrovertibly knows its object. Alright. Now, unless you study Lurik, it may be a little bit difficult. But I think sometimes we can explain the mind in a way, it's almost like a really short version of mind. Just to understand what is meant when we talk about consciousness of mind all the time. Simply by thinking, what are you doing right now? What are you experiencing? Are you aware of something right now? All of you are aware, right? So what is it that is aware? Your mind. Your mind is right now aware. You experience something. You see sights. You hear sounds. And there is a conceptual mind that is constantly thinking. That's your mind. And every one of your mind always has content. It sees something. Unless the mind is not active when you're asleep, when you faint, okay, so that you don't see anything. But while you're awake, you constantly see something. Even when you close your eyes, depending on how strong the light is, you see some redishness, right? Coming from probably the blood in your eyelids. So therefore, you you always have a content, you always see sights, there's always an appearance of visual objects or sounds. Plus, there's always something you're thinking about. When you meditate, you're focusing on something. Right? Even if it's a single point of concentration, even if it's your own mind, even if it's nothingness, then that becomes your content. The nothingness, whatever that means to you. So there's always an object, there's always a content or an object. But the mind on top, so the mind, basically what's easy to remember is there's always an object. And the mind, at the very least, is aware of the object. Right? So the mind is aware of the object, and the object appears. Something appears to the mind. There's an appearance. Right now, of course, I appear to you. I don't have to enter your mind for you to say what I look like. It appears to your mind, right? Your eye consciousness. And even your conceptual mind, if I ask you, think of your breakfast, what happens? Appears. With its color, with possibly the plate on which it is, etc. Right? Okay, so it always appears. But there's something more. Some minds incontrovertibly know their objects, and some minds don't. Some minds you just know. I mean, I know, for instance, let's say I was angry this afternoon. You know, if I'd gotten angry this afternoon, I know I got angry. You may doubt it, but I know. I experienced it. I know absolutely. There's nothing you can say to convince me I wasn't, because I experienced it. Or if it was a different mind, or that I ate food. I know I ate something. So you can tell me whatever. So I had a valid cognizer. There was a mind that incontrovertibly knew. And we have minds that incontrovertibly know. But let me tell you, oftentimes we use the word I know in a very, very, very loose sense. We don't always know. We oftentimes believe. Right? We believe. Okay. I know Sona's birthday is today. I heard from his sister. So he's not here, but he's got his birthday today. But if he was here, I would say, do you know for certain today is your birthday? You would probably say yes. 100%, 99%. Because whatever day you were born on, I mean, our parents told us we were born on that day. In fact, once I taught in LMB, I taught once at the Land of Medicine Buddha Center in the US. And it's the same thing, you know, so much we don't know. And there was a person in the audience who said, you know what's really funny? I thought the longest time that I was born on the 5th of May. But as it turned out, I wasn't. I was born on the 6th of May, but that was my parents' wedding day. And I thought I would interfere with celebrating their wedding day. So they just put 5th of May on the birth certificate. And he found later he was actually born a day later. Right? So he said, I don't know, I thought it was really interesting, but I guess, I don't even know whether you can get away nowadays with like computers and everything to kind of fake it. But at that time, apparently you could give a different birthday. And Tibetans do it all the time. I mean, no, Tibetans when they arrive, well now they don't really arrive from Tibet any longer, but they didn't traditionally knew their birthdays. It just wasn't marked down. They were born the year they maybe knew. You know, like they have this Chinese tradition of like the year of the dragon, the year of the monkey, etc. So they knew the year, and based on that 12 years, you don't really make a mistake. Because we always have 12 different years. So they knew the year, but they didn't know the date. And they were like, let me think, when is a good day to have my birthday? Were they birth certificates? So they made something up. Oh, let's have a birthday sign, that's nice. Let's shed off a few years. Right? I mean, surely many of them didn't go to school in Tibet. They may been older than the school age. They wanted to get an education, so they took up 5 years. That's a 12-year-old one. But they got an education, so fine, right? Anyway, the point being that we don't know everything. We don't know so much. We Googled it. We looked it up on Google and think, oh, now I know. Right? I mean, it takes a little bit more to really know. We may be 100% convinced. Correct assumption, yes, all that. But there's really little we know. And that's okay. We can still do the things we now do. But I think it's important to understand what real knowledge is. Why? Because in Buddhism, there's certain things you just need to know. If you don't know emptiness, you won't be able to overcome the afflictions. You don't know the subtle working of karma. You don't need to know the subtle mind of a Buddha. None of these things you need to know. But a few things you, unfortunately, really need to know. Subtle impermanence, suffering nature, our existence. Talked about a little bit yesterday. And emptiness, most importantly. That we need to know. So for that, therefore, we need to know what it means to know. Because the loose sense in which we use the word to know is really like being convinced. Or knowing about it, as in like, there's something called emptiness. Yeah, that's important. Okay. So anyway, the true truth are known by two types of valid cognizers. So there's two types of mind. Why are they called valid cognizers? Because they validly know their objects, cognize their objects, incontrovertibly know their objects. They're valid in that sense, that they incontrovertibly realize their main objects. Ultimate truth are the main objects of what are called ultimate valid cognizer. So here, ultimate valid cognizer it's more specified, but right now you can just talk of ultimate valid cognizers that know ultimate truth, and conventional truth are the main objects of conventional valid cognizers, which points to the close relationship between phenomena and the minds that perceive them. It is important to understand these two types of mind. So all phenomena, everything that exists, is either a conventional truth or an ultimate truth. If you look at the illustration, conventional truth or an ultimate truth. So anything that exists but is not emptiness, we call a conventional truth. And everything that is the emptiness of the phenomenon is an ultimate truth. So what is a conventional truth? The main object of a conventional valid cognizer, and the ultimate truth is the main object of an ultimate valid cognizer. It's not that difficult, but it's simple. It's helpful to have that kind of sense. What kind of mind perceives which? What does ultimate truth refer to? So it's just emptiness, emptiness of table, emptiness of myself, emptiness of you, whatever emptiness you're thinking of, that is ultimate. That is an ultimate truth. Okay. Now again, you may find this difficult because this way of dividing things, we're not familiar with this. 2,600 years ago, when the Buddha was around, it was a very common way to divide things into this truth and that truth. We don't do that in this time, so we have this extra disadvantage, making it difficult. But then again, we have advantages as well. We have scientific backgrounds, some basic knowledge of science, which helps again in terms of our understanding of logic again to understand this. A valid cognizer, and here we already explained it, but here it's explained again. A valid cognizer refers to a correct consciousness that realizes as cognizes, or incontrovertibly knows its main object. Any mind, whether a sense consciousness or a mental consciousness, that incontrovertibly knows its main object is a valid cognizer. Okay, so any mind, as long as it knows its main object, it can be a sense consciousness, can be a mental consciousness. You can mentally know, I can mentally know I had anger before my sense consciousness don't know that, but my mental consciousness knows. I know incontrovertibly that I remembered something this morning, for instance. Or with your sense consciousness, I know I saw a blue car coming towards me, for instance. Among the different categories of valid cognizers, we are mainly interested here in the category consisting of ultimate and conventional valid cognizers. So it helps us to understand that there are these two categories. It helps us to understand the two truths better. It's all explained on the basis of the mind. In fact, Buddhism explains everything on the basis of the mind, so no surprise there. In general, ultimate and conventional valid cognizer differ in that ultimate valid cognizers arise in dependence on ultimate analysis. Yeah, so just in general, an ultimate valid cognizer is the result of searching for something, searching for the inherent existence of something, searching for something more than being just labeled, right? Not being satisfied. This is the word that I usually use. I'm not satisfied with an I appearing because I labeled it. I have the sense there's more than that. Beyond the label, there must be something there. I didn't just label I, there must be something there. Because it appears all the time to my mind. Right? That's like looking for the solid rainbow that always appears to our mind. It appears to be solid, it appears to be located in a certain place. It appears tangible. Sometimes, depending on the outer circumstance, it may appear so solidly. And I'm not convinced that this is just an optical illusion. I want to find it. So similarly here, I'm not satisfied with someone saying it's merely labeled, the I is merely labeled. No, to my mind it appears differently. So I want to find it. I set out to find it. I set out not literally, physically set out, but I engage in ultimate analysis. This means that an ultimate valid cognizer is the result of a conceptual consciousness that is not satisfied with just the appearance or conventional designation of a phenomenon, like a house. Not satisfied with just the appearance or the conventional designation of a phenomenon. So it investigates how the house exists. By analytically searching for the house based on the way the house appears to us as existing inherently from its own side. So now let's look for it. Were the house, hypothetically, if the house were to exist in the way it appears to us as inherently, etc. existence, it would not just be labeled in dependence on its parts. Right? Instead, it would be findable. It could be found in relation to its roof, its walls, its windows, and so forth. There would be some essence I would find. So the mind that engages in ultimate analysis searches for an inherently existent house by examining whether it is the same as its parts or different from its parts, whether it is one of its parts, all of its parts. What else? The collection and so forth. And none of this makes sense. We've gone through it before. As part of the introductory part. Eventually the mind comes to the conclusion that the inherent existence of the house is not findable. Or in other words, that the house does not exist inherently. For its inherent existence is impossible. At first, the mind is convinced. Right? Okay, can I be found? I looked everywhere. So imagine, we don't lose patience, we don't want to watch a movie in between and kind of give up. No, we're like, someone holds a gun to our head, scans our brain as we're doing this, and it's now, you have to do it. You've got no way around it. So you're doing, your life depends on it. So now thinking again and again, different techniques, you really keep on it. And it's not there. No matter how, it's just not there. It's not findable. It appears that way, but it's just not findable. So first you're convinced. Yeah, I cannot be found. First you're convinced. But then you continue through increasing familiarity with that reality. It eventually comes to realize the emptiness of the house. You come to know. It's really not there. The other example I sometimes give, if you believe like you're in your room and for days you believed there's someone in your closet. Someone there. Waiting to touch you, so you don't sleep well, you're worried, you keep hearing things. That's a bit like our holding on to a self, right? We believe emotion it triggers an emotional response. So there's someone in that closet. I don't even dare to look, or it seems to be too much of an effort to get out of warm bed or whatever. And so there's this conviction, so then you open it, and you look for the first time. That's the only way to find whether you are hallucinating or you're imagining or not. So you have to look for it. So first you're convinced it's not there, right? But before long, you know there's nothing there. You've really looked in every corner, so you know it's not there. You incontrovertibly know. Someone can tell you there's someone in there, and you're like, no, I just checked, there isn't anyone in there. I know what it would be, what a person looks like, so there's no one who looks like a person, so it's not in there. So similarly here. Here is of course a little harder, it's more difficult. The object that you're finding is much more elusive, it's much more difficult to really grasp. The moment you look for it, what am I looking for? I mean, the person have a very clear sense of what that means, but the object of negation, that's really difficult. Because even now, I mean, it's kind of there, but kind of not. When you really try to focus on it, it disappears, right? So that's harder. But anyway, you search, and you really don't find it. So, but through increasing, but one thing I need to say, the way I describe it here, because it's just a handout on emptiness, it makes it sound that all I need to do is just do it again and again and again, and I don't have to do anything else. But if I have a lot of negative states of mind, I get angry all the time, I harm others all the time, that means that my mind is very much in alignment with ignorance. I'm strengthening my ignorance. All our afflictive emotions, anger, hatred, resentment, self-centeredness, they all work in alignment with our root misconception. They all have the same view, basically. They work similar. In fact, they all rise from this misconception. But when we have more anger and more, when we have a lot of afflictions, then we also strengthen that. Also, in turn, strengthens or at least supports the misconception. Which is why, if we want to understand emptiness, usually we say we have to accumulate a lot of merit. But that's just another way of saying develop a lot of positive states of mind that are in alignment with wisdom, love, compassion. So real love and compassion can really only be generated once we realize emptiness. Then it comes natural. Of course. Right now we cannot experience unconditional love because we always want something for that imaginary I. We want something back. But if we know that this imaginary I is exactly that, imaginary, just created by our own mind, our love is unconditional, because it doesn't expect anything back. For what? For whom? Nothing there to receive a reward. It's just for the sake of care and love. We're totally free to love. We have all the energy can be directed towards others. Before we've realized emptiness, our love is fake. I mean, not fake all the way fake, but it's much harder. But still, if we can still familiarize our mind with that kind of love, we can become more familiar. Like, what's the point in always wanting something back? I've done that for many lifetimes. Since beginning time, I'm still caught in samsara. So it never brought me anything. My conditional love has never in any way, it's always led to disappointment, unrealistic expectations. Let's just try our best to just give to people without a reward. You can do that. Even without realizing emptiness. What's the point? It's so you don't do it with joy. When you really give and love unconditionally, you do it with joy. You see the other person is happy. Nothing better. Whether they think you or not, you can't care less. Right? So that is an alignment with wisdom. That kind of mind, we can train ourselves in that already now. So accumulate a lot of virtue is really just another way of saying generate as many of these minds as possible that are in alignment with wisdom. That you would naturally generate if you had realized emptiness, but we can already do this now. So therefore, these minds, they also undermine our misperception. They undermine our misperception. If you always give, and you never think of yourself, then you pay less attention to that self, to that inherent I, and it's much easier to understand it's not there because you didn't pay attention to it in the first place. Does that make sense? Right? As one of my classmates, we had a very high lama in our class. Some of you may know him actually, because he teaches now. Maturumchi. Has anyone ever heard of Maturumchi? No. He's from the Khalung Kagyu tradition. I think he, in the Kagyu tradition they have many different lineages, so Karma Kagyu, Dikpa Kagyu, and Khalung Kagyu is also one of them. I think he's just become the head of the Khalung Kagyu tradition. His name is Madhyamaka, which Ma means cook, and Tru means Druva, as in like True or reincarnation, because he was the cook to the fifth Dalai Lama. He once told me during a debate, we were chatting a little bit. So I said, where does Madhyamaka come from? He says, well, they say that one of the previous ones was the cook of the fifth Dalai Lama, and he practiced a lot. Anyway, it was really nice. We once had a debate on selflessness and so forth. And I asked him, what do you think? What is the reason why accumulating merit, or in other words, generating these states of mind, like unconditional love and so forth, enables you to understand emptiness? Why does it assist in the realization of emptiness? And he said literally, when you realize that the chair behind you is empty. No, sorry. If you give a lot of love and compassion, you don't pay attention to that which is sitting on the chair behind you. Right? You're getting up and you're helping two sentient beings all the time, so you're giving up the self that's usually seated on this chair. So when you do this and you don't pay attention to that being on the chair, that imagined I, in other words, then it's very easy to realize it's empty and it was empty in the first place. Okay, say again. If you visualize, when you engage in, so right now we have a sense when we sit on the chair. Usually our actions are such: we sit on a chair, just resting to look after ourselves. Right now, like the analogy you used was like. We are self-centered at this point. We don't get up to help other people unless it benefits us. But usually you sit on this chair and just try to get for ourselves, right? Just get for ourselves. When you start practicing unconditional love, you get up from that chair, right? And you do things for others. So he said, once you get up from that chair, then it's much easier to realize there was never anyone sitting there in the first place. It was just a projection of the mind, right? We imagine this self that sits there to exist inherently, but it was never inherently there. So when you don't pay attention to this I all the time, it's much easier to understand it wasn't there in the first place. So forget about the chair. You can still see some question marks on your face. So the point is, when you don't pay attention to inherently existing I, because you practice unconditional love, when you forget about it, it's much easier to realize it wasn't there in the first place. Yeah, you just used the chair. He said it in a way like, the chair. When you get up, when you realize that he actually literally said, to practice love, you realize that the chair was empty in the first place. That's what he said. Right? That's so clever. Because psychologically they align. These two, they support each other. Which is why just sitting down to realize emptiness and meditating and then having a fight with your neighbor and continue, not going to work. It's not going to work. Because when you have that fight, even when the fight is over, it leaves something behind. It disrupts the mind, whether you call it karmic energy or a hindrance. in the end there's something left that blocks your ability. So we need to do other things as well. Accumulate virtue in the form of practicing as if we were already had already realized emptiness and would now practice unconditional love naturally. Very important. Okay. Anyway, let's say we do all this. And then we should at the same time also search for or generate this particular ultimate cognizer by searching for the object. So at first, our mind is merely convinced, in the case of the house, that it lacks inherent existence, but through increasing familiarity with that reality, it eventually comes to realize the emptiness of the house and becomes the ultimate valid cognizer, realizing the ultimate truth of the house. Okay. Now it's late. If I go to the next bit. It gets even later and later when you're tired. Amazing, you're still with me. You're still with me. No one is falling asleep. I keep watching. Unless you're hiding behind someone, but no, you're not. You're all they can see everyone. Yeah, I know it's late. I know it's late, but it's easier to talk and stay awake versus listening and staying awake. Okay, any questions? If you have to go, please, you're welcome to go. Don't hesitate because you may have a bus waiting or need to get home. But in case not, who is playing candy? I know it just comes up. I know it does not. That's how I recognize it. I'm kidding. All right. Any questions? No question. And again, you're welcome.
Yes, question.
Does clearer inventory realizes our have self-centered attitude?
We'll get to this. This is part of the last bit. Yeah. Do hearers in solitude realize our hearts? Do they have self-centeredness? The answer is no. Self-centeredness. Yeah, okay. Sometimes the word self-centeredness is used. We don't get to this. This is different what I'm going to talk about later. So an arhat and a person who's liberated, who's eliminated the afflictions, but still has what I call the imprints, the obstructions to omissions. So this person has no self-centeredness. But then sometimes the texts say they are still self-centered, right? Okay, then that's a different type of self-centeredness. So I've had the explanation that there are two types of self-centeredness. One that is a mental affliction, and one that is not. So that explanation then, based on that explanation, an arhat has the self-centeredness that is not a type of attachment, because that's gone. But doesn't have the mind that wants to dedicate their effort for the benefit of all sentient beings. They may not believe that it's possible, or they may not believe that they can do it. So they don't have the attitude, I want to benefit all sentient, I want to be there for all sentient beings. In that sense, self-centeredness, but not the attachment. Yeah. Any other questions? No more? Okay, fair enough. So let's conclude this session to not waste all the merit, all the positive potential accumulated. So let's dedicate it towards realizing the true truth, the ultimate as well as the conventional truth, so that we can overcome our root misconception. And with our wisdom, remove all the obstructions to liberation and enlightenment for the welfare of each and every sentient being. So with this in mind, we recite the prayer. Chanchu Semcho Rinpoche Makye Panam Kyekyo Kepa Nyamba Mepaya Kome Kondun Perva